Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mamluks podcast. My name is Sim. Along with me are my co-hosts, Sheikh Amr Saeed and Mahin Islam. What's going on, fellas?
Assalamualaikum.
What sound like what's happening?
It's good to see your pretty faces, guys.
We have Mort is attending a family matter, so he's missing. But gentlemen, we have a state of emergency across the country. 40 cities are in a pretty tense situation where there's a lot of protests and fires and all that. And I know that all of us have been sharing a lot of videos on WhatsApp groups and stuff, but we haven't really talked about it. We're just kind of sharing everything and really making sure that we're all in the loop with everything that's going on. But we haven't really given our thoughts about anything that's transpiring. But it's been a couple of weeks since our last episode. I'm sure you guys have other thoughts and stuff on the matter. But again, let's start off with Mahin Islam. What do you got?
Dan, it's just like got crazy real fast. You know what I'm saying? Like I think it is spilling into the suburbs right now. So those of you guys who aren't living under a rock, everyone's seeing that you get these riots popping off. Riots, looting, whatever you want to call it, rebellion. I mean, some people want to call it a rebellion. Property damage going down. The way I see it is that it's hard for me to like I'm not out there, right? So number one, like I'm not going to a protest. Number one, I'm saying that much. But number two, I don't have a problem with people going. But three, the last thing I want to say is what happened to COVID-19? Like, is COVID-19 like gone? Right? I mean, it seems like we're all like, I expect a spike. It seems like COVID-19 doesn't care. I'm surprised no one's talking about that because COVID-19 does not care that there was this police brutality and that people are upset. If it's gonna get you, it's still gonna get you, right?
Okay.
So I don't know, but those are kind of my overlying thoughts in my head right now. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's interesting you brought that up. Let's kind of bring it back a little bit to the officer that put his knee on the what's his name, Floyd. Why do I always forget George Floyd's George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes or so, and eventually killing him. That led to some protests in Minnesota, and then quickly, it seems like in a blink of an eye, those protests spread all across the country, and it started pretty much peacefully in Minnesota, and then it became very violent, and by violent I mean where looters came into play and started ransacking a lot of the businesses, whether they're small businesses or large businesses. Businesses eventually got impacted, right?
Yeah.
So and I want to parse that phrase, violent protest as well, because that's being kind of thrown around and used irresponsibly. Because in many people's minds, violent protest just means throwing rocks against the authority, like the Palestinians do, right? And then in certain respects, violent protest can mean burning buildings afire or looting and causing property damage. So there's many different meanings to violent protests, right? We have to understand because there's so many layers to what's actually happening. There's many different, even in the protests and the protesters, there's many different complaints that many of the protesters have against the police. And it's not necessarily the police in themselves. There's many people who are just tired of the institutional racism that's happening, structural racism. There's people who are against the current status quo, the neoliberal capitalist structure that's in play. There's anarchists, there's Antifa, people who are against Trump. There's a lot of different movements. Even the LGBT movement is part of some of these protests. So when they all kind of coalesce and become uh, labeled as the protesters for Floyd, for George Floyd, it seems like um, everyone is being labeled as part of this movement for George Floyd when it's not necessarily the case, right?
Yeah, and some people who are just fed up with being quarantined. I think they saw an
That's
excuse to get
true.
out.
That's true, and I think it's
Some people
given.
were like this. Yeah, they just want to come
I
out and
think
be
some of these
transparent.
protests are much more larger than they would have been if had we not been in a quarantine situation. I think we're wearing masks as well has allowed these protests to give people a sense of anonymity where they can freely walk around wearing masks and do whatever the hell they want, causing damage to property and even possibly authorities, right? I want to, before we get into this too much deeper, I'm not going to speak for Sheikh Hammer or Mahin, but at least for myself, I don't see myself as pro protesters 100% or pro the police 100%. There's valid arguments on both sides, and I know some of this falls on the left and right arguments and the anti BLM and the pro BLM stances on certain things. You guys know how the Mad Mamluks. I don't have to give you guys uh, a summary of what we're all about, but we're very objective in whatever we see, and we're hopefully going to do our best in commentating about it. So we're just going to talk about things the way we see it, and hopefully we can come to some sort of agreement, or maybe come away with some things to just at least talk about or think about later on. But yeah, Sheikh Hammer, what did you think about how things were playing out as we were sharing a lot of the videos and photos related to the riots and the protests?
Yeah, man. I really didn't think that riots were going to happen. I knew that there was a threshold that's about to be broken, but I didn't know it was going to be now. I thought because of, honestly, when I saw the video the same day or the next day, I think it was, when the officer had his neck on George Floyd's neck, and then all the people were telling him to get off of him, and then he ended up dying. He wasn't moving anymore. I knew that it was going to be something big on the news, but I didn't think that it was going to. As soon as I heard that there was going to be protests, then I was like, oh, there's no way that this is going to end good, you know?
Yeah,
But I really didn't think there were going to be protests at this level. This is where things got really crazy. And then you heard New York, and then Chicago, and then Los Angeles, Atlanta got really crazy.
yeah,
Uh,
almost 40 states across the country. I don't think people even had the. So when social media was being overwhelmed with pictures and footage of all the stuff that's happening in all these cities across the country, there was just an insane amount of footage. I remember being up till 3 o'clock, 3:30 a.m. in the morning, just going through all Twitter feeds of after Twitter feeds of various um, social media people who were collecting all this footage. It just seemed like no one could catch up to everything that's going on.
yeah,
Some of the more prominent videos, well, I kind of shared with you guys where there were some things related to the New York police, some police cars driving to the protesters. That I put it on Twitter that it reminded me of the Egyptian protests where remember where the police cars would run over people. You
yeah,
remember that, Sheikh?
yeah. That was
In
happening in New
in
York, man.
yeah. So it was just crazy to see this kind of stuff happening in America, man. It just blows my mind that we're at this juncture in America where people are at each other's throats,
And
and
a
it's
lot of people, oh, sorry to cut
yeah,
you off. A lot of people projected that too, man. But I didn't think it was going to happen now. A lot of people are projecting that there's a boiling point. We've been hearing that even since the 90s. Imam Siraj Haj used to talk about that too. But I didn't think that I was going to get at this level where now, look, the police officer, I know people are sick of hearing this, but look, police officers have a job to do. A lot of them have to deal with a lot of crazy stuff, which is why they're on high alert. A lot of them aren't trained. A lot of them are deployed in the parts of the city that they don't even know, the mapping of the city properly.
Don't you think
And
the police officers have just become emblematic of what they're against? It's not necessarily the police officers themselves. I'm
yeah,
sure with some protesters, it is the police officers themselves, but they become a symbol of uh, people who protect the 1%, the elite, the richest parts of
yeah,
capitalist societies against the masses, everyone who else, the have-nots of society, as many
yeah.
would say.
But you have to remember, these are all happening in major cities, man. People have been warning. I mean, there's so many things we could talk about. There's so many people that have been warning, for the past 10 to 15 years about, white supremacists and KKK infiltrating and recruiting authorities. That's one element to it. Wallahu alam how exaggerated that is. And then a lot of these protests are happening in the cities, and the cities have the most roughest police officers because by default they have to be rough because of the nature of the city, right?
Yeah,
So then you're dealing with these police officers. A lot of these things are not going to happen in the suburbs. None of these marches are probably going to happen in the suburbs. It's not a central place. It's not a place where people are going to get lots of attention
yeah.
internationally, right? So a lot of these things are going to happen in the city. But at the same time, you have police officers that are they're just like natural. They're just normal human beings. When they get alerted, they can get trigger happy. A lot of crazy things can happen. But then you have police officers that really want to do something and help, and then they're surrounded by people that are taunting them. Like, think about it. Think about yourself, right? I think generally, alhamdulillah, we're pretty decently patient people. We come from good families. We have good values, alhamdulillah. But if you're surrounded with people, yes, no matter how much training you have, if you're surrounded with people that are constantly taunting you and throwing things at you, there's a threshold that's going to break, right? And then that's what happened with the cars. I'm not saying that's okay, but the SUVs and the Ford Explorers ramming into people. When I saw something like that, I was like, dude, this can get really really bad. And now it's like what 40 states now you said where
Yeah,
protests have happened.
40 cities.
Like if it was like 3 states, then it would be like okay, this is maintainable. But couple that with COVID-19, couple that with because the anxiety and stress that is built up people, even mistrust about the world, the states especially are divided as far as COVID-19. Some are still talking it's a hoax. Some are thinking. I mean, there's just too many things that are going on right now.
12 cities have a curfew in place.
Yeah, and Chicago did declare a curfew, right?
Yeah, Chicago
And
was
there's
getting out of
people
hand.
now that don't even know about the curfew properly, and the police are attacking families and cars
Yeah,
because people that didn't really understand what the curfew was, and I think that this can end really bad. People are going to talk about martial law, and there's parts, that the National Guard has been deployed, but I think that the fight that people have in them now for revenge, and then couple that with Russian trolls and stuff that people are talking about, and
yeah.
I think that this chaos is going to be it can be inshallah it won't, but this can get really really bad.
Well,
I mean,
people are thinking that could be a civil war, and serious people, intelligent people are thinking that the eventuality of this of the way the lines are being drawn in America are some kind of a hybrid race war type of a civil war.
and why wouldn't it, Sim? Dude, Sim and Mahim, check this out, bro. We have since Obama got in office, even before that, there's been so many militias down south, right? And now, if if anyone cross paths now with those militias, and those militias want to revolt against what's happening, and they don't like what's happening,
Yeah.
right? Dude, I can totally see all-out civil war happening. Why not? They've been
He-
preparing for this for
here's
the past years, bro.
here's why
Aren't
I
these
don't.
mostly like white militias?
Yeah, that's where the statistics come from. Where majority of the terrorism that happens in the United States is from some of these white militias or these militias down south, basically,
So
and they're
so
strapped to the.
if there's a civil war, who are the player? Who are the so supposedly the sides, the army? Like who's actually going to be doing the fighting?
I think remember what the last podcast where we were talking about this, Mort was kind of theorizing this as the main sides who I think he was saying people who are generally right wing, they're pro militias, they're involved with some kind of organized military, have military experience. They would be on one side, and people who are more left and and Antifa oriented people would be on the left, on the other side of the fight. I don't see a civil war happening, to be honest. I just don't. What I will say is going to happen is that the system will make corrections, and people who have seen the Matrix, right? You ever see the Matrix movies? There's adjustments that are made, calculations that are done to maintain order and maintain conformity and absorb people into what's considered acceptable behavior. So what they will do is, if I was to guess, they would instate some new levels of training to police officers, and the system will always correct itself to make the people, push them as far as they can until they go to their boiling point. They want them a few levels below the boiling point, but I don't see a civil war happening because precisely of the problems when you talk about the players. You see on the right, you see the people who have the militias, but on the left, what do you see? You see a bunch of affluent white kids who are part of Antifa. Those guys will get mowed down by the by the people on the right. If there was to be some kind of a race war against two sides, it would be completely
What about well, Sim?
a massacre.
Wouldn't that be that's kind of like long term though, right? Like changing policy. I'm talking about right now. Look, let's put this in perspective. Those individuals were protesting because they thought the consequences for the police officers was not enough. They want the police officers to be in jail, right?
Yeah.
Not just fired. Now, let's just say, like, somebody has to take the hit. Do you think they're willing to say? I mean, if you want to go down, like, just what do they have to say to calm the people down to put them in jail? Let's just say those officers go to jail.
Which isn't guaranteed, by the way. The placing of his knee on the neck, that was part of their handbook. There, it is allowed. That is a standard, or the protocols of engagement were actually followed. But he didn't die. George Floyd did not die from strangulation, as the autopsy revealed. That he had some underlying conditions that I'm sure the knee on the neck caused. I'm not saying that wasn't but it wasn't strangulation, and I think
I totally get that, but
Yeah.
I think what's happening here is the fact that he died was the boiling point, right? That was the threshold that's been broken.
Well, not only that, but this is the clearest video we've seen, I think, out of any of these cases. I don't remember seeing another video that was this long
yeah.
and this clear.
Yeah,
of
it was
what
like long
happened.
and drawn out where you can see the whole process. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so what I'm saying is this. What is it going to take, do you think, to stop these protests? Like if they say, okay, we're going to jail all four of them, because that's originally why the protest started. Does that mean that everything just stops like that? And
I mean, I think originally if they had, they should have arrested the dude, and people are still upset. He's only getting charged with third degree murder. He's not going to get charged with first degree murder, right? He's getting charged with third degree murder and manslaughter.
Doesn't first degree have to be premeditated? And
some people say it because there's reports that they worked together for 18 years as security guards in the same facility.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
what are you talking about?
He's saying that George Floyd and the police officer worked together. Is that what you're saying?
Derek Chauvin and George Floyd worked security at the same facility for like 17 or 18 years.
No.
Now, some people are saying that they're like, well, we haven't confirmed that they knew each other because they may have been overlapping different shifts. But like, it's usually if you work in the same facility, you may overlap at least at some point. So they're wondering if there was some premeditation that went down with it.
I have yet to see this bit of information, but I'm sure if that is even true, look, I'm not sure if it even changes the fact that whether or not he is guilty or not. I think in order to pacify and make the public at ease, they will throw the book at him, right? Or as far as they can. What I am worried about is, at least in the respect that this has become an issue about race, you know, and it's something that we've talked over for several podcasts in the past, that, you know, the way the capitalist model, the neoliberal model follows, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be about race. When you go into Eastern European countries where there's hardly any immigration, or hardly any other colors to be found, they're doing the same thing that they do to black people to their own people. Or when you go to France, right? Who is it? Black people they're really targeting, or is it the major minority, the largest minority, which happens to be North African Muslims, right? So is it really about race, or is it about how what we talked about with many other imams? So I know, remember Imam Muhammad, he said, I love the phrase he said, capitalism goes after, finds the shortest route, the path to the path that has the least resistance is the path that capitalism seeks to exploit. What was that black masjid he came from? Imam Muhammad. Mahin, do you remember?
That made it really easy. Imam Muhammad was like Ibn
So
Saud.
you're talking about
No, the Malcolm X mosque, man. The black imam.
The black.
No, sorry, not the Malcolm X mosque, the Muhammad Ali mosque. I got my black people mixed up, bro. I'm sorry, black people.
Oh, Imam Omar Muhammad.
Yes,
Omar.
Imam Muhammad. I got his last name right, bro. Hey, I've been having so much difficulty with Floyd's first name because
I know. I could tell you were going to confuse with Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah,
I knew it.
but George Floyd doesn't roll off the tongue. It's not like, remember, it feels like Michael Floyd, like just rolls off the tongue.
Just say Floyd George. It'll be easier for you.
I'll just say Floyd.
Yeah, but nonetheless, I mean, bringing this back to our true perspective. Number one, it's a systemic issue. Yes, are there people that are racist? Of course, there's people that are racist, right? But on a higher level, it's a systemic problem, and systematic changes have to occur,
right,
for these things not to happen. But the problem is these things are, it's inevitable in this type of system. These things kind of have to.
Let me put this forward to you, and I put this forward to on another podcast. Some brothers invited me. If the powers that be were black, let's just say that the rich people in our country, the 1% of the 1%. Let's say they were black. You think things would change?
No.
Absolutely not. Right? Because it's not about race. It's about certain sectors of society placing their foothold, their knee on the neck of everyone. It's not just Floyd himself. It's about everyone being under the thumb of these power structures that have amassed a great deal of power, wealth, security, and they're utilizing all these tools that they have at their disposal to exploit everyone, right? And people aren't understanding that it's not just about race. We're not saying that racism doesn't exist or anything, but that's just become the way it's manifested itself. The black people in this country have become the most susceptible to racism, to the ideas of since slavery, that these people were never taken care of by their slave masters. The people who eventually freed them, they never really gave them the freedom that they ought to have deserved. They never gave them the proper schooling the proper leaders. They're, as Imam Omar Muhammad explained to us, remember that the basic black family is broken just by having an absent father. The basic unit of a society is the family, and when the father is missing from that family, well, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to have a breakdown of young men who are completely void of how or everything that a father provides to a son, right? In terms of knowledge, leadership, training, and things like that. You're having these communities instead being run by for charlatans like Jesse Jackson and them. These guys who line their own pockets and don't do anything to take care of their own people.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, so like if you're saying the let's say the hypothetical that if the 1% of the 1% is black, what does that mean for other things? What does that mean for police forces? What does that mean about like
That
slavery? So we're assuming that everything else is the same except the 1% is black,
Yeah,
right?
because the underlying thought in our society is that in capitalist societies, we always think about me first, our interests,
Yeah,
and what is the number one, um, what do I have to look after first, and
yeah.
and the premise or the substrate that where all these people are operating from is how do I protect my wealth, my security and my power and my influence in society, and when you are operating from those principles as your substrate in thinking, this is your wavelength that you're operating from. Well, what do you expect to happen? Yes, it just happens to be black people who are suffering, but if it was, let's just say, you were to replace that 1% of 1% with black people, you think those people up there at that 1% and 1% change the situation of black neighborhoods and society? No, they wouldn't. They
No,
would.
yeah.
Wait, you're breaking
They
up.
would just be like, "Oh, we good now. If we can make it, y'all can make it." Sorry,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
good.
Yeah, as long as we're okay. Yeah, I mean, look at the most powerful athletes in America right now. How many of them stood up for Colin Kaepernick? They're all black, right? Why didn't they stand up? And why didn't they kneel with Colin Kaepernick? He was standing up for black rights, right? But they had numero uno to think about. That's how our society makes us think about things, right? We think about ourselves first, and then as long as our neck is not on the line,
Yeah.
then we'll think about Colin and whatever. Why did LeBron James go on Twitter and all of a sudden start talking about the things related to this protest when just a few months ago he was upset about some other GM getting involved in politics in China and costing him money
Yeah.
with endorsements with the Chinese. All of a sudden, LeBron James wants to chime his mouth in because no skin off his back in this thing because the American
Right.
government can't sanction him and his products, right? The Chinese
Right.
government can. So he wanted that GM to shut the hell up, right? So this is the hypocrisy we see in society play out the way it is. We're seeing an inherent ideology of selfishness and of me protecting my interests, my power, my security, as much as many of these people on Twitter and on the left, they'll talk about all the rights that they want to afford to black people. If they were in the power structures that be of the wealthy and elite, they would be doing the same exact thing that those guys are doing right now, which is
Yeah,
nothing.
and again, that's not to say that there's not systemic racism to a certain degree, or to
Absolutely, there is racism. There
there
is
is.
racism. It's just manifesting the way it is. I'm not saying that Michael or sorry George Floyd's death was not because of racism. It totally was, and there is horrible conditions related to how police are enforcing or their rules of engagement with many different minorities, whether it's black or Asian. I don't care. I'm not saying all that. I'm just saying the way it's playing out is much more deeper than that.
Yes.
We're
So
just
I
seeing
would
the
say that
symptoms of it.
superficial, even though it's dangerous and it's scary, yes, Jim Crow laws, slavery, civil rights, all of that is still in. We still see many, many remnants of all of that, and why the the African American community, why Black America has always been, you know, under the boot of people, and um, there's all those things, systemic issues, and but at the same time, if you look even deeper, like you're saying, it's a systematic issue, or systemic, I should say. It's a systemic issue that all this is from, right? And that's why we have to obviously discuss the Sharia when it comes to matters like this too, right? We can't, and obviously that's our goal, but um, a lot of it comes down to one thing I see with a lot of Muslims is we're not talking about any exchange or a solution when we're talking about these issues. We just are very reactionary, and reaction is a good thing, but what are we giving to people as an exchange or a solution? Even a little bit of a solution or a temporary solution to all of this, right? And you know, uh, uh, I think that I think what we're seeing now, we're going to see a lot worse. And I think these boiling points, they're like a system, but just like there's economic, crashes and stuff that happen, and then they have to happen again, and they happen over again, and
Yeah,
a lot of these social issues that are going to keep happening. They're going to snowball
because
because
the
if you still
revisions
listen,
keep happening. We're just like the
they
Matrix,
keep
right? They
happening.
keep on introducing new revisions. Like, oh, okay, well this will make sure society is maintaining order and conforming to the ideals that we've laid out for them and the vision that we have for them, and that they're participating in the behavior that we expect them to behave in. So that the wheels of the economy and profit and all that keep moving. We
And no
have
one can deny, man. No
yeah
one can deny these are times of fitna, bro. From levels of sicknesses, from levels of mistrust. I mean, think about it. People, when they're listening to just everyone all around the world, when they're hearing their government speak, no one really trusts them.
yeah because what you're
Because
seeing what you're seeing play out in America is happening to some level or another in every country in the world. In the UK, it
so much
happens
mistrust.
with the Indians and Pakistanis. They're the kind of the lowest rung on in many different cities across the UK. In France, it's with the Algerians and half of them with the last name Munir, spelled oddly, Mounier. I don't know why they spell it like that, but well, I'll have to have a talk with them. Um,
But
yeah,
Sim, check this out, dude. Like, just look at us. I don't like when I see President Trump talk, the president of the free world, the president of the superpower of the entire world.
yeah,
When he talks, the first thing I do is just start laughing because for me, it's better. When he told me he's not going to have briefings anymore,
yeah,
that little phase that he went through, and he went back to it. I was like, oh man, no more. That was literally like awesome entertainment for me, like Saturday Night Live. Like I love when he talks more than Saturday Night Live any day of the week because he'll talk and then Dr. Fauci says something completely different.
a completely
And I
intelligent
was like,
person.
man, this is this is like the best comedy. But dude, this is that's reality, bro. Like if that's my mindset, how am I supposed to trust anything that he says?
Yeah,
And how are people generally going to trust anyone? And then you have people that side with. I mean, coming back to COVID-19, I'm just using that as an example. Some people are completely on a camp that this is overdone. Some people are completely on a camp that we really have to take more precaution. That's how the whole entire society is divided. And then you have a society which, we even see on the news, right? And I think we could segue into this if you guys don't mind. Is people start stating out statistics now, right? Start hashing them out like, no, actually, white people are more, subjugated to killing from police officers, and police officers is more white people that are actually killed. They're just not reported as much, right? That's one thing, right? And then you have to take into consideration the amount of African Americans that are in the United States and the percentage that it happens to, and the percentage of white people, let's say, that it happens to, right? And so even on that level, there's so much misinformation and mistrust too, right? On a race level.
yeah.
And then there's some people who are just out to get all police officers because they think that they're all just vicious and crazy, and it's a very very disheartening issue because we see all the holes in the game now. We see that everything is a lot weaker, more delicate than we thought.
Yeah,
Right?
so yeah, with Trump, it's the other thing is he's seen as the stoker of all this because when the Michigan protesters happened, when they
Oh
stormed
yeah.
the Capitol, he was like, or his rhetoric with the white protesters is completely different. It's like very fine people, etc. And then with this stuff, he's like thugs.
Yeah.
Um, if you start looting, we'll start shooting, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a so you have this discrepancy here that he's still got to cater to his base because an election season,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then yeah, this whole thing about COVID, I think that just highlights it. No one trusts everything's like, well, how do you know anything? Well, that's where we're at. Well, how do we know anything?
Yeah.
How do we know how do we know anything is real?
It's a time. That's what I meant, man. It's a time of fitna,
That's
bro.
true.
Times of fitna. The people are supposed to be trusted to give you information. There's no trust.
On top of that, you hit with this whole like, okay, so now if you want to talk about like the race issues coming up again, when you see that there's a whole issue of like allyship with black people, right? And but everyone seems there doesn't even seem to be a consistent measure of what that actually means. Okay, so we as non-blacks, what do we if black people are clearly the subjugated minority in America, they're the ones being targeted. You know, if we're gonna go on that, okay, how can we help? Now, sometimes some people are saying like silence is oppression, silence is racism, but then some people will say something because they're just not informed.
Yeah. Well, why are white people going to protest? Like, why can't white people go to protest? Why not? Why can't Asians? Why can't Arabs? Why can't Chinese or Asians or other ethnicities from around the world or whatever segments of society that represent America? Why can't they participate in something that they see as oppression and they stand besides other black men and women and stand up with them? What the hell is that? So I hear this all the time in a lot of these videos. Like, oh, look, there's white people in there.
Oh, because they're saying the white people they're provocateurs, or they're the ones like I know in St. Louis there's like a
The Antifa white people, sure,
targeted
yeah,
by white yeah. But the thing is now even when you're protesting, you don't even know who's standing by. You don't know who you're protesting with. You don't know what their agenda is.
I'm saying like there are people from the right wing and the left wing. So on the right wing, they say, "Oh well, it doesn't even seem like the black people are upset. You see a lot of different other ethnicities there. It's not even mainly black people that are upset. It's other people who." So they're trying to discredit, right? Whenever something that disrupts the system, the behavior of what the system is expecting you to behave as. With protests and things like this, they want to discredit whatever is happening. And the way they do it or delegitimize it by showing the hypocrisy in many of the protests that are happening, right? So what'll happen is, look over here, they're beating up this guy, or they're looting and stuff like that, and they make that a representative of or representation of what the protests and protesters are all about, right? So and then that's in one. If they can't do it like that, they will delegitimize it or trying to change the truth about what's happening. Like, for example, maybe not in the Floyd video, but in other videos, oh well, you don't know the entire video or what exactly happened that led up to this, and try to change the facts regarding the situation. And so on. So there's many ways that if it can't discredit it that way, it'll use other forms of like for example, causing disunity among the movement itself. So make it an issue about race among the movement. Like, oh well, why are you joining us Mexicans? You've been oppressing us along with the white man. You're part of the problem, or making other races not bond together with the African Americans, and make it cause internal strife among the movement itself. So there's many other vehicles that are used to disrupt this, and let's just say it can't even do it, and it seems like from the way it's playing out, it's not going to be able to utilize these tools, and eventually it seems like they will introduce some sort of legislation that requires police officers to go undergo more training and things like that, and that'll probably quiet the masses for a while until the next thing, maybe economic related activities, because you see Europeans, they don't they oppress their people just the same as Americans do. They have the same, violence and drug problems that happen in inner cities over there. They just don't have the number of guns that they have in Europe, that they do in America, and so they don't have that level of violence. But there is the same level of poverty and stuff that exists throughout the UK, all the way into the eastern bloc of Russia. But what's the difference? The difference is that there's different skin colors involved, different ethnicities that have kind of carried their way since the colonial days. Different ethnicities that formed the slums of various countries, or whether it's Germany, or with the Turks and stuff like that. You see different areas being exploited, right?
Yeah,
So
right. I got you saying. Well, I want to stop you
go
real
ahead.
quick. So you mentioned the police reform. So people, we've got like, yeah. One of the things I think we need to see is that, so this guy Derek Chauvin, I think his name was, he wasn't like, he didn't have a clean record as a cop.
Yeah.
I think he had other misconduct charges, except in the past they he got absolved of. The issue with the police is they need to look at it like, they're like, well, most cops are good, but we got a few bad apples, right? Like, like everything. Um, they have to like tighten that up. Like, for example, you wouldn't say, I think I saw this on Twitter, some comedian was like, well, you're not gonna be like, well, our pilots, for the most part, they're pretty good. we got a few bad apples that like tend to crash planes in the mountains,
Yeah.
right? You gotta like get rid of. You can't have. They have to have like bad apples internally, right? That's one thing. But I think the root cause of this here is that black folks are upset that people want to think that they know what they're going through. And I think that's the root thing. Like, we don't know what, because of. I think that's what's surfacing. That's what I see surfacing. This entire notion that, like, yes, we can help them out, but they don't want they don't want us like stepping over the line, so to speak, and like assuming something or saying stuff that like, oh, we know how you feel, because the reality is we don't know how they feel.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know. Like, I don't know, as a non-Palestinian, I'll be honest, I don't know how Palestinians feel. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't pain me the way it would pain a Palestinian what's going on there.
Yeah.
Right? When somebody is like, people, when I'm seeing like people talk about crying when they see Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck, mostly everyone who said they were crying, who got that emotion, was a black person what I read. I didn't see that for myself. I saw it was bad, but like, it didn't elicit that kind of emotion from me, right? Remember Sheikh Amr? Remember that show we did about India like last year? You got really emotional. How much of that is that you being Indian? You felt like people are gonna connect differently with their own kind, and I can't say that. So I think it was black, when I was on a Facebook thread last night where with some coworkers, and this one guy, he's like Macedonian. He's telling some black guy, like, I completely understand how you feel. I know how you feel. And it's like, man, you don't know how I feel, bro. You need to shut the hell up. Like, the problem is, like, when you start saying that, like, I know how you feel. I feel your pain. No, you don't. We don't. I don't feel your pain. Like, and and I have to acknowledge that first, but like, but now you tell me how can I help you out, though, right? I see there's injustice being done. I see there's a wrong being done. How can I help you out?
Yeah, but let me throw that back at an individual that said that you don't know how I feel, right?
Yeah.
I personally think there's some truth to that, but it's a wrong statement, and I'll tell you why. Our job as Muslims is Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar, right?
Right.
You love what Allah loves, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You encourage good, and you discourage and you forbid the evil,
Mm-hmm.
right? So another way I think of taking care of that situation is saying, like, I know it's very difficult of what you're going through. I'm very sad that you're, or that you're feeling this way. But regardless, no matter what's happening to people, if it's wrong as a believer, as a human being, we just want it to end.
We
Right?
want it to end, right?
You want it to end, right?
Okay.
So when somebody says that you don't know what it feels like, for me, that's an incorrect statement. That doesn't legitimize whether me doing something or not just because I know how it feels. Like I don't have to feel anything what someone else is feeling.
You lost your
Oh,
audio.
we lost your audio.
Go back 30 seconds and repeat what you said. He's still audio still off. Your
Yeah.
audio's gone, dude.
We lost your audio.
Is he muted?
No.
I can't hear you guys. Can you guys hear me?
Now we can.
Now
Okay.
we can. Okay.
So what I was saying is, before I got cut off, basically, is that when somebody says that you don't know what we're going through, so for me as a believer, I don't have to feel exactly what you're feeling. I just have to know that if something's wrong, then I'm going to take your side and help you.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
I know it seems very, very like.
Well, it's difficult because everything is being drawn across racial boundaries, and people are being forced to think from this prism of race. And I think that's something like people like myself have taken exception to. Like, I want to look at your humanity. I don't care about your,
Yeah.
not necessarily. I don't care about your color, but I don't ignore the issues that come with your color, but I want people to look at issues in society just the way Sheikh Hamir has explained, that what is just and what is unjust and what is right and wrong, and how do we as Muslims forbid what's evil and enjoin the good, right? All these are frameworks that are already in place in our faith, in how we look at society and how we engage with society and how we determine what is just and what is unjust. And I'm not sure the language that is being framed by certain leftist elements, and I'm not even going to say black people, because there are certain specific amount of a small amount of black people who are engaging in this rhetoric online. When you meet them on your everyday interactions, most black people that I've met have always been very welcoming to any kind of protest or any kind of engagement within their mosques or in their society. They've always been very welcoming. There's just been certain elements of the left, specifically from the critical race theory crowd, who really gets involved in this language of my experience and my they always have these little industry speak jargon that they kind of throw at your face and try to discredit you from whatever good that you're trying to accomplish and trying to help people in whatever good you want to spread, right? Yeah. Of course. And, when I say I know what you feel, it doesn't necessarily mean I know exactly what you're feeling, that I experience the same exact things that you've experienced. When I say I know what you feel, like, hey, I empathize with you. It's just you're getting caught up in semantics and trying to you're taking out your anger on someone who is trying to empathize with you and trying to really understand what you're experiencing.
And that's why I mentioned that.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, Sam. That's why I mentioned that. I didn't mention it to rebuttal you. I mentioned it so you don't fall or you don't have to feel guilty, because that's how people make guilty trip you. And sometimes because of the pain that people go through, they sometimes have a right to say that at that moment because of what they went through. Fine, we get that. But no one should think, for instance, like you said, just because you can't feel what the Palestinians are going through, what that means is I haven't experienced it with them in that place. It doesn't mean that you can despise what's happening against them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What happens when people say it to you, oh, you have no idea what we're going through, it's almost as if, dude, am I even supposed to be thinking about this anymore because I haven't experienced it?
100%. I'm so glad you just said that, Sheikh, because what you are in effect doing is you're isolating people from even getting involved in that. I'm like, you know what, the black people or Uyghurs or Palestinians, I'm not part of their crowd, so you know what, let them figure it out, because they've said that, you know what, that's my experience and you have no right to comment. Like,
That's what divides people.
I can't dance on these eggshells. I don't want to walk around You know,
So
so
I get what you're saying, Maheen, but people shouldn't be. We do as human beings, we do illogical things all the time, irrational things, right?
Hmm.
But you shouldn't let that hold anything, hold you back from doing anything because us as believers, we're not going to have again the same feelings that other people have, but we have to know what's right and wrong. And if it's wrong, we have to number one ask Allah for help for it to stop it, and then we have to take proper avenues in this world to stop it, even if we don't feel it. Right? Like you mentioned something about India.
Yeah.
That's true, right? I'm originally
Right.
from India. I lived in India for a long time. Same thing with in Egypt.
Yeah.
But whatever happens, like somebody they say like you know. I just realized your son, he fell on the ground, he was crying, he was bleeding, went to the park, and you know you barely even reacted to it. How do you he said, how do you become so tough? I don't think I'm tough, but what that comes from is, and anything that happens to my family,
Hmm.
I'm not a type of person that really cries about anything. Even my
Hmm.
son, I don't want to make fun of my son, but even when he was diagnosed with leukemia, I only
Hmm.
cried once,
Hmm.
just the first time I found out about it. Wallahi, I never cried about it after that,
Hmm.
because all the crying that I did, and Sim, you can attest to this, and you could definitely be a witness to this, is ever since the late 90s or mid 90s, we've been following what's happening in the Muslim world,
Hmm.
and we've cried all of our tears for other people's children, probably not even our own children,
yeah,
Hmm.
right? So other people's children that I've never met, I've cried much more for them than I've ever cried for my children, ever.
I,
Hmm.
I know. I can tell
And
you.
how does that happen, though?
Yeah.
Sim, how does that happen? Is that if you realize what's happening to the Muslim world and you realize that they're the children of Muhammad Sallallahu, and even if we don't know them, we love them, we have to take a bullet for them as a fard, as
Hmm.
believers,
Hmm.
and we are the honor of Allah and Rasulullah, all those children are our children.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you could tell me I don't feel whatever. That's up to you. I know what I feel, but I know what's right and wrong because Allah tells me what's right and wrong. And if He tells me that, and Muhammad Sallallahu tells me that one drop of Muslim blood that's spilled unjustly is more valuable than the Kaaba and the Haram and its surroundings, we have to embody that,
Hmm.
right? And we have to take that extension to other people too. If someone's innocent, I don't care what their affiliation is. If they're being oppressed, I have to try to see if I can do something about it. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
can't let somebody
Hmm. But
trample all
like,
over my intention and say, "Oh, you don't feel what I'm feeling. You haven't experienced." Yeah, maybe I haven't experienced what you experienced.
And a
I
lot.
did.
well, the thing is though, the context is it's people who are the people who I see who are being said this are people that normally don't say anything. They're usually like they might be like pro Trump. They may be like it's not really bad. COVID-19, we should let everybody out. It was the person who got accused of like who came and said, "Oh, I feel what you're saying." That person also it like presented those so it also depends on
That
like
that person
the context.
in that
Yeah,
context and that person had
yeah,
some other
yeah,
issues related to
yeah. But
other
people
things
see
that.
that people. So what's happening is that like, but yeah, like right now, what is the responsibility of Muslims in America? Like the reality, like because right now I don't know that we're getting what do you think Muslims in America like? By the way, I only said I'm only not going to protest because of COVID-19. Like there's going to be a spike. Like if there wasn't COVID-19, if I could wake up before 2 p.m., I probably would go. But
Yeah, everyone's got their sleep messed up, man.
The spike is real, though, man. Yeah.
yeah, but like Sheikh Hammer, since you're the religious authority on this podcast, uh, what do you think the community should be like? What do you if you had to like map out the game plan for our community and how we like cooperate with all this stuff? What would your take be?
Number one thing is look. This is my personal take on it. Look, Islamically,
Yeah.
let's make this clear again. If somebody just started listening now to the podcast
Yeah.
at this point, is that we have to encourage what's good, and good is what Allah tells us is good. The
Mm-hmm.
only paradigm of good that I'm seeing of what Allah tells me is good, or what Muhammad tells me is good, or principles taken from the Quran and Sunnah that
Mm-hmm.
are good, and what Allah tells me, Rasulullah tells me, and principles that are taken from the Quran and Sunnah that are considered bad, that's what I'm considering bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as what's happening in the United States, just as far as Black America is concerned, I have to do whatever I can, which is good for people that are being oppressed. I personally think that the protests that people are a part of right now, there's very, very few that are actually looked at in a good light. I'm not saying what's right and wrong. I'm not talking about it's right, what people are.
You're talking about
But
perception.
somebody just told me yesterday, and somebody told me today, hey, let's go to the protests in Chicago. I was like, I'm not going to those protests. I'm going to try to raise awareness in other ways on a more Islamic level and talk about systemic issues of why this is actually happening. Either we can react to it, and go to
Mm-hmm.
protest, which is fine to some degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and or I can raise awareness and I can talk to people of influence and actually help people because if it's a systemic issue, that means I have to change the system if I'm serious about changing this problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I have people around me, number one, asking them if they're okay, being a part. Maybe there's a Muslim group that's, raising awareness on an Islamic level and inviting, even if it's, a Black Lives Matter members or whatever the case is to the table and discussing with them. That's cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you tell me in a situation like this, how come you're not at protests and standing and facing cops? Um, Islamically, I personally don't think that that's the best way about taking care of this problem is going and facing cops and basically fighting with them and locking horns with the police right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I may be wrong, but as of right now, I don't think that that's the most Islamic thing to do right now. You know what I'm saying? And if you want to protest, obviously there's certain ways of protest. If you're, I mean, just on a side note, and I'll finish and then simmer. You can talk after this. Is that protesting can be a very powerful tool, but you have to use it properly too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when people uh, go to the Daily Center and protest wars that are happening in the Muslim world. I mean, that's cool. You're raising awareness. That's pretty cool. But I think what would be more profound if you're talking about protests, if you go to Muslim embassies and consulates in the United States and tell them to do something about what's happening in the Muslim world, right? So something, for instance, happening in Pakistan, something's happening in Egypt, for instance, right? Um, and we're just talking about the Chinese Muslims, right? If you were to go to Muslim consulates and tell them, hey, do something about your brothers that are being tortured in these dungeons on Chinese land, right? I think that would have a much more profound effect as far as raising awareness because you're actually going to the root of the people that can actually change the problem. You guys understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Right. That makes sense.
All
So I
right.
would go to Pakistan and be like, hey, you're neighboring China. Why don't you let's gather thousands of people and and raise awareness and put pressure on the Pakistani government if you want to protest
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, do something about your brothers. Change the shift instead of us going and begging and saying, hey, take care of our problems, America. Right? How many problems are they going to take care of first and foremost?
Mm-hmm.
And number two, you can't have other people take care of your problems. You have to go to your own brothers to take care of your brother's problems. So I think even protesting has to be strategic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, so right now, what we basically do, at least regarding the protests, is just it's going to be a wait and see game and see how far these protests spread. If they are just going to be just a few days, or will they be long drawn out protests where we see that they really force the government to change? And something I learned from Imam Omar Muhammad was when he was talking about the core basic black family unit was that you you know that they don't you know that there's no real change until they actually work towards improving the condition of the basic black family unit. And that's when if you were to measure some sort of sincerity of wanting to elevate the situation of the African American in American society, that would be a at least some form of measurement to follow.
Yeah, and I think like for instance what Mike Swice is doing, Allah bless him, and a lot of people they go to the inner city and do dawah. I think that's at least what we should be doing is go to the inner city
Yeah.
and let them know about
He froze.
You froze again. Yeah, Sheikh. He.
La 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 la.
It's a cute pose he's making.
Instead of
All right. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, you're back.
oh,
Can you
darn it.
can you go back?
You were saying about Dawa in the inner city, and then you froze.
Yeah, like Dawa in the inner city. I think if you want to start somewhere, I think that's a beautiful place to start. Right? How many people actually do Dawa in the inner cities? They don't. That's why I said Allah bless Mike Swice and all those other brothers. I know Islamic Oasis. They do Dawa in the inner city too.
With the
Chef,
Burmese, yeah.
Drame, right?
Yeah.
Rami and
So-
Sur does it with the prisoners.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of different efforts that we all have to try to see where we
There's
can fit
there's
in.
a friend of mine, Dallas. He's he became Muslim about 6 years ago. He was saying this is an opportune time for Dawah because a lot of these people who are activists are like secular in nature, and they can only this opportunity to show them justice from a divine point of view,
Yeah,
right?
That's very
Because
true.
they're not going to get justice. I think if you be real, like you ask me, we're not going to get this issue isn't gonna this is going to be generational. We're probably maybe at least 1 or 2 generations away from like a situation where black people don't feel like they're like being like targeted or something, or
but
they're
one of the more attractive qualities about Islam, as opposed to the leftist view of how activism should take place, is that we're not as petulant. We're not like childlike. Did you guys see the Facebook post I shared recently of some activist who was saying that the store owner participated in structural injustice towards black people by calling in the police, that he should assume some sort of responsibility on what happened, or at least he should be partly responsible in being part of structural racism by calling the cops on George
You're the
Floyd.
Muslim guy, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the owner was a Muslim guy of the store, and the clerk called the cops, and so the social justice warriors' take on it was that Muslims should stop trying to not take responsibility for their part in structural racism by calling the cops on this black man who that clerk thought was committing a crime by presenting him a counterfeit bill, right? That's what happened with George Floyd, that they thought that George was presenting a counterfeit bill, and she called the cops, or he. While the strangulation was taking place with the knee over the neck, that clerk ends up calling the owner and says, "Hey, they're killing this guy. What should I do?" And the owner, tried to give whatever advice he can, try to tell them like, "Hey, get them to get off his neck or whatever."
I think he called the cops too, or something like that, right?
They call
Yeah.
the cops. Yeah, but so the angle that I've listened, I was on the phone with a couple guys the other day who are of that opinion that like that guy has they're not the people I've talked to, they're like, listen, he's not a bad guy, but like you can't be calling the cops when you're in a black neighborhood. You can't. You gotta know you gotta know enough to like know that like calling the cops isn't gonna end well on a black person.
So that's the most ridiculous and stupid statement. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide the brother who said that to you, because that is preposterous. Like, when does someone's skin color come into play? When
You don't know what it feels like.
No, but like let me finish. So,
wait,
because the
I
idea
have a gun
is
pointed
that,
at me, but he's black, so I can't. You know what? I can't call the cops. Are you out of your mind? Like, it's a crime taking place.
but that's how it happened here, right? So like number one, so what we know is that like it's a $20 bill that was counterfeit. We don't know if he knew it was counterfeit or not. We know that George Floyd would frequent this store, but like on occasion, so they knew him. So the question is, this guy who was like, if it was an Arab store owner and an Arab guy gave a counterfeit bill, would they just try to work it out, or would he have called the cops?
But I'm sure they would have called the cops. Why not? Why?
I don't think
why
so. I think he would have worked it out. I think he would have told them like, "Hey man, this is counterfeit or something. Can we like maybe he's like, did you know it was counterfeit?" I think he would have worked it out. I don't believe he called the cops.
Who knows? It's a theoretical. Like
Theoretical, right?
how can we know
Yeah,
exactly what's going on in someone's head? We don't know whether
right.
what level of racism.
Now the
That person
policy
seemed like
is that
he was concerned enough to call the owner of the store and say, "Hey, they're killing this guy. What should I do?" It
right,
doesn't
but
seem
at
like
that
he's a
point,
racist person if he's that concerned.
yeah, I mean, well, the person who called the cops was black, was like an 18-year-old, like so it was like store policy.
Wait. The owner wasn't at the store though.
The owner was not at the
The
store,
owner
correct?
wasn't at the store, so how is the owner's fault? It's an
It,
18-year-old black teenager who called the cops on.
they're criticizing the owner's policy, is what they're saying.
Get
The
the hell out of here! That's
policy,
the stupidest thing in the world, dude. That is absolutely ridiculous. So
So let's just say that the owner's policy is that if you see something counterfeit, you call the police.
and I believe that's a state policy too, right? And
this social justice warrior is telling you to break the law. Then
yes, they say that this entire it's kind of like you know in Ertugrul where the Seljuk state becomes corrupt, so we don't listen to them anymore. That's pretty much what it's like.
anyway,
So
this is
I get the concept of, hey, look, there's rules of the street,
Yeah,
right, and then there's rules of the government and the state and all that. I get that, but I don't know. I think again,
you know what? You know what happened once to me? I bumped into a car on the highway. It was a van. I wasn't paying attention. I'm a horrible driver. By the way, I've been pulled over many times by cops, and I look black, and I never had a problem. But I'll be fair when it's due in the inner city in many
the fact of the matter
situations.
is the fact you're still alive, man, means you got privilege, bro.
So anyway, I
Anyways,
did,
go
but
on.
I bumped into a van, and we pulled over
Yeah.
to the side, and I said, "Hey, let's leave the cops out of it. I'll give you a couple $100 cash. Just follow me to the cash station." The guy was more than happy to take $200 because he had a bump that just I didn't want to on my record. I didn't want an incident on my record, so I just went to a cash station and gave him a couple $100 for a dent on his car that he could literally pop out. He could stick his hand in there and just pop it out of his car. But we worked it out, right? We worked it out without the law being involved and things like that. It was unnecessary in that respect to escalate the situation to law enforcement and things like that for minor incidences. Now, counterfeit money is it's a federal crime. That's something that's that the FBI takes very seriously. So I'm sure whether you're black, white, Latino, whoever ethnicity you are, you need to call the proper authorities to resolve it. Now, it seemed like it was $20, John. I don't know why you would want to call the authorities on
that
$20.
18-year-old kid was probably thinking that he's gonna get fired if he doesn't report this anyway. Dude.
Yeah, because sometimes there's like those traps too. You know what I'm saying? Those stings.
And I do know that there was there was an FBI agent I heard because I spoke to some people in Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
They know the guy, and they were like, "Yeah, there was an FBI agent that tried to trap him with some counterfeit stuff."
Yeah, there you go.
A few months back. So, but then like the response would be, "Well, if you know the person, because there's an assumption that he knew George, right?" And he should have worked it out with George. But it's hindsight 2020. I don't think anyone like people who are saying that they're responsible for him dying that's excessive.
But do they know? Was there? I don't know the detail, or maybe you guys do. Did that guy like argue with George Floyd before all this happened about it being counterfeit, or did he just take the money and?
I don't think they realized. So my understanding is, and you guys can, if I missed something, I think he paid for his goods and he went outside, and then they realized after the fact that it was counterfeit. So George Floyd, I think, was just chilling outside the store. Like he was just sitting down with the cop. I think it was an angle. He was just sitting outside, and then when the cops pulled up. So I don't even know if they told him, "Hey, this is counterfeit. We got to call the cops, etc." I don't know.
Yeah, like why is there the assumption that it was against Floyd? Maybe they're just reporting the actual counterfeit bill. That hey, we got a counterfeit bill that possibly needs to be investigated. So. There's a lot of guesswork and conjecture, but the reason why we even got to this point was that the leftist thinking versus the Islamic model of justice is is so petulant and childish, and it's all about blame and hate, and it only their compassion is just another form of hate, and because it's so exceeding where it becomes malicious and poisonous, and it further divides people instead of bringing people together. Whereas in our faith, in our tradition, we have justice on its own. You know, we fight for oppression and fight against oppression, and we want there isn't division that's brought forth. I don't see us at each other's throat. I don't see me and Sheikh Amr debating about who's more oppressed and which form of oppression takes greater priority over another. Things like that. That leftist discourse, particularly the critical race theorists, take. They have a field day with. This is something that they love. Not just studying among themselves, but disseminating to the public and trying to prioritize certain issues over others. Whereas Islam and Muslims, we see what's ahead of us and we join in the good and forbid the evil, as the Sheikh said.
I'm glad you mentioned that. The whole point of dividing people. I had to mediate between two guys the other day. They were Facebook friends. They didn't know each other, and they got real bad because it was about this whole what responsibility was a store owner having, right?
Yeah.
And one guy was like, well, he's a good guy. I know him personally. And the other guy was like, now you're playing identity politics just because the guy doesn't mean
yeah,
we do this right. You know what I'm saying? And then it got to the point where it was the thread got deleted. It was on Raja Abdul Haq's post.
Yeah.
One of his posts. It was a thread where one guy was talking about come here and I'm gonna stick my what in your mouth and your wife's mouth.
Whoa.
And these are both practicing Muslim guys. And I was like, and I told both of them, I told both of them, listen, you guys, both of y'all, I don't what the hell did y'all do to let it get to this point? It was well, I called him a clown first, I guess, but he said this. I'm like, you should, one of you, I don't know, I don't care, man. You should have called him up at that when they got to that point where I was like, now what happened? Are you happy with? He convinced you? No, he didn't. You convinced him? No, he didn't. Now you got some guy that you got beef with because of what he said about your wife.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? I was like, man, I was pissed. I was like, both of you guys, listen, you got your points, articulate your points, but now you got both of y'all lost your shit, right?
Yeah.
And
so I mean, you see even the leftist discourse, how it penetrates even some practicing Muslim brothers and sisters that we think that, mashallah, they're from a practicing background and they're, so stand up, upright Muslims that, we need to emulate and sure, anger and temper gets the best of any of us, but we notice, at least among the leftist discourse, is that it's not necessarily bringing people together. And something that I have to give more towards the right with is that they're in certain respects. I'm not saying in everything, but in certain respects related to bringing people together. You know what? I'm not going to give the right that. I was going to concede, be more conciliatory with the right in certain regards, but they're picky and choosy just as much as the left is. So, they're both.
I thought you were just going to go tell us all to go watch Tucker Carlson or something.
No. I thought about how they were more nuanced and related to how certain issues happen. But again, they're full of crap just as much as the leftist thinkers are.
Nonetheless, bro, it's a time of fitna for sure.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, and sometimes going into the middle of these protests, I believe, man, and that's why you have to pick and choose very, very carefully. You can be in the middle of a fitna, and you can, things can go really bad. Not only for your safety, but for your iman. And, some of the people that you see that are there, yeah, they're trying to be in a celebratory spirit. They're dancing and end up fighting and then looting. And you have to pick your battles very, very carefully, man, even if you're going to protest. So even just some Muslims out there, man, if you want to go a part of any protest, make sure you read about it, research it very well before you go, if you want the best out of it. And don't just be a part of a us versus them and just start smashing buildings. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What about
the
Yeah,
whole.
man. Yeah, I was like, I saw a Nike store got looted, man. I was like, dang. What if they had the Chunky Dunkies? That could have been really bad.
I was imagining what Mahino was going thinking through. Like he might have a list of things that he would love to raid.
I'm like, how do you like? To be honest, man, I probably would have gotten run over. Like me, I'm a little dude and I'm slow.
Did you
You're a
see?
little.
Did
I'm a
you see
little
And,
boy. And I'm
listen, I
Did
think
you guys see the
Facebook.
CNN
I've
headquarters?
been logged off of Facebook and everything since Ramadan. Should I get back on or should I stay off? Am I missing anything?
Not really. I'm not on Facebook much.
Yeah,
I'm on
WhatsApp
Twitter
groups.
more.
It seems to be a lot of the stuff is being forwarded to me.
Twitter's much more fun these days, at least related to protests, because things are coming in so much more quicker.
Yeah.
So
And IG Live, people who are protesting. But like, can we talk about COVID real quick before we wrap up? I'm
oh
like,
boy,
yo,
weren't
like,
you the one who said I'm bored of COVID talk?
I
When we
am,
were
but
in the
like, I
WhatsApp.
know the idea of like how it's in a protest. I'm like, that is the point.
Mm.
Like, COVID is so people who are like talking. I think Kamran Pasha, was it? I saw he tweeted about like the lockdown. He's in more of the camp that like we shouldn't be locked down.
Yeah.
And now, well, how are they going to justify going back to a lockdown after all these protests?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I know we're phasing back into stuff, right?
I don't think they're going to phase back into a lockdown. As much as the medical community says that, oh, you know, as the hospital beds fill up, then another possible lockdown can come back. I just don't see that happening unless there's just unless things spiral out of control. Now that the infrastructure has been put in place related to creating ventilators and other equipment. What's that called? The masks and stuff.
Yeah.
Protective.
N95s.
Yeah, the protective gear or whatever that nurses
Yeah.
and we're all supposed to be wearing. Once all these mechanisms are in place, they're not going to put a lockdown, go back to a lockdown situation. At the end of the day, everyone is concerned about their well-being and they want to make money, and I don't see it's something I called it right in Jerry's podcast when with Jerry Hionis. I was saying I don't see them going on with the lockdown for more than a couple months. It's just 2 to 3 months seems like a reasonable period until they have the proper facilities in place for them to take care of people. And after that, it'll be business as usual, and people will have to live, you know, along with each other in maintaining safe distancing and washing our hands and things like that, and all that stuff will still be in place. But I'm just saying, I don't think we're gonna have a lockdown again.
Do you think that we haven't seen the worst of it? Like I kind of felt that obviously.
I'm not saying that we haven't seen the worst of it. It can certainly get a lot worse. They're just they're just gonna be better prepared for it.
I think what kind of happened is in the beginning when everyone heard about it, everyone just kind of hoarded everything to this whole post. They thought it was going to be a post-apocalyptic world, and then we reacted to a certain degree, and maybe it was necessary. But now they're kind of sick of it, and they're getting out. But this can possibly be the worst of it now, is because when we first reacted, this knee-jerk reaction that we had, we reacted to it, and now I think because things are opening up and people are being sick of quarantine or locked up, I think that it can probably get a lot worse now, man. I don't know.
It can. It certainly can. Look, there's no my cousin Akbar. We had him on the podcast talking about COVID-19. He's an expert in COVID-19. He's seen some horrific things that he's told me, and there's no way I can ever say that COVID-19 is not a threat or anything. I have firsthand knowledge. Like first person on the ground who is considered an expert in this, telling me like, hey, this thing is friggin' dangerous. This is just do not ever let your guard down thinking that I'm young and I can handle this. He's seen the young people my age and younger come to their knees, and their life is not even the same again. There's people who've behaviorally they've changed. They're like psychologically, like their psychological patterns have changed from as a result of it. One person, he was saying that he couldn't even eat anymore. The guy can't eat. He's recovered from the disease, and he can no longer eat. And they're trying to get him to see all these psychologists and stuff all over the hospital. In gastrointestinal internal. I don't know how to pronounce that, but you know, GIs, yeah.
Oh, but so it's a psychological thing. Why?
No, we don't. They don't know. It
They don't know.
it could be psychological. It could be actual physical. But that was just one incident. I mean, he's got so many of these cases that he's been telling me about.
Yeah,
That.
no, for real. My friend, he's a doctor. He's younger than me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's on day 11 or no. I think he's at it longer now. I don't know if he's recovered, but he lost taste and smell.
For how long? I think, is that permanently or?
A few days.
Oh.
No, a few days.
Yeah.
Like during the So
No, there's some people who've lost taste and smell for weeks though. It took them at least 6 weeks for their taste and smell to come back.
yeah,
So
that'd be a good time to go on a diet.
yeah.
You just eat bland chicken breast and broccoli.
Well, you can't lose. Can you lose your taste in terms of your the four basic tastes: the umami, sweet, sour? I don't think you could lose that. I'm sure you would. If you tasted something sweet, you would know it's sweet. I mean, I think what he means by taste is just the nasal passages, what you smell, that contributes to the taste.
We're talking about the physical taste buds. You can't lose those.
Anyway, it's a scary time. I mean, all the stuff related to protests and compounding on top of the COVID-19. It sucks, but I wish I could say it's going to get better, but I don't think it is. I think it's just going to be a compounding effect over the next few years, where things are just getting escalated between America and China related to Hong Kong, the South China Sea, increasing trade wars, increasing levels of alliances, patterns that were not too different from how the world condition was before World War One, where there were just intricate set of alliances that were existing all around the world, where one shot, one fire, one assassination caused an entire world war. So we may not be that far away from that kind of a situation either. So but keep close to your family. Make sure that you keep your family and yourself safe. And
I would also procreate as fast as
Procreate.
possible. Yes, because in case you die, you want to leave your genes behind.
of course, yeah, that is a valid point. Increase. There's going to be a whole lot of babies apparently after the COVID-19.
Maybe fertility pills too. If any fertility companies want to sponsor us, we will take sponsorships.
I'm a big fan of
Put out,
bidets.
like twins or triplets, maybe, if you can. Ideally, I don't know. Is there anything like that where you can be like, this stuff? My wife's advisor back in with residency, he had 3 kids, and I think he wanted one more kid, but his wife was getting old, so she took fertility pills. She had triplets.
Shut up. How old?
I think she was getting close to 40.
Oh my God. Triplets.
Yeah, she just doubled. You went from 3 to 6, boom.
Holy cannoli.
Yeah.
I
Anyway.
don't know how people deal with even twins, bro. If they're twin boys.
All right, guys. That's our show for the afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Eid Mubarak, belated Eid Mubarak from everyone on the Mad Mamluks
we
to
gotta
you
talk
guys.
about Eid, bro. Eid Mubarak.
What Eid? There was no Eid, man.
I had a great Eid, man.
I had a great Eid too, bro.
All right. Yeah, I guess you want to talk about your Eid? Is it something worth mentioning?
We're talking about your Eid. We'll just do it later, bro.
All right. We'll see y'all next time. Assalamu alaikum.
So,